You stare at a puzzle and something clicks. Not just the answer, but the thrill of it. At 70, you still get it. And what if that one moment, that single solved puzzle reveals more about your brain than any doctor's test? Here's the truth. No one talks about your ability to solve certain types of problems after 70. Doesn't just mean you're sharp. It means your brain is doing something extraordinary. And if you can still do it even once you are carrying inside you a power that most people lose without even realizing. But the question is, how long will it last? And what is this puzzle really telling you? Because here's what scientists, neurologists, and psychologists won't always say directly. There are certain cognitive skills like abstract reasoning, memory sequencing, and pattern completion that tend to erode with age, slowly, quietly, but they don't vanish for everyone. In fact, for a rare group of people over 70, these skills not only remain, they sharpen. And if you're one of them, or you feel like you might be, then what's happening in your brain is not ordinary. It's exceptional. And this is where the puzzle comes in. I'm not talking about children's puzzles or quick crossword fills. I mean a real test of your mind's wiring, a logic riddle, a pattern recognition challenge, or a sequence game that requires you to hold multiple ideas in your head, eliminate the wrong ones, and commit to a solution under mental pressure. The moment your brain still solves something like that at 70, it's not luck. It's legacy. It's your neurons communicating in a way that defies the expected curve of decline. And if you're doing it, you need to understand just how rare that is and how urgent it is to protect it. Because here's the secret: cognitive sharpness after 70 doesn't stick around by accident. It stays because you feed it. And if you don't, if you coast, simplify, avoid challenge, avoid risk, avoid the unknown, your brain will follow your lead. It will shut off circuits you stop using. It will reallocate energy. It will start pruning just like muscles atrophy when unused. So when you solve a puzzle, your brain gets a signal. This still matters. Keep this function alive. It sends blood flow. It strengthens synapses. It tells the system this person still needs high-level reasoning, pattern analysis, memory mapping. And that changes your trajectory, not just for fun or curiosity, but for real cognitive preservation. But here's where most people make the mistake. They treat puzzles like entertainment, as something they used to enjoy, something to do on a rainy Sunday. And what they don't realize is that the puzzle isn't for fun, it's survival. It's one of the last games where the stakes are your brain's future. Now ask yourself, when was the last time you truly challenged your brain, not entertained it, but stretched it? Because doing the same crossword every morning doesn't stretch you, it comforts you. And comfort is the enemy of growth. You need novelty, complexity, friction. That moment when your eyes narrow, your breath holds, and you feel your mind reaching for the right answer. That's not stress, that's life. That's what keeps you here, not just existing, but thriving. And if that's still happening for you at 70, then your brain is not just still working, it's extraordinary. But don't take that for granted, because even the best minds, the strongest minds, begin to slip when they stop seeking new edges. Because when your brain still solves puzzles at 70, what you're really witnessing is the continued strength of your executive function, that rare ability to plan, focus, filter distractions, switch between tasks, and persevere through uncertainty. And here's what's stunning. This function is one of the first to erode in cognitive decline. That's why most aging minds don't lose memory. First, they lose the ability to navigate complexity. They stop solving. They give up before starting. They avoid new information, not because they can't learn, but because they've lost the hunger to organize the unknown. But not you. Not if you're still solving. That means your brain hasn't surrendered. It's still hungry. It's still agile. And that more than anything predicts your independence, your vitality, your identity. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't even realize they've begun slipping. It starts small, losing focus mid-conversation, forgetting why they entered a room, getting frustrated by simple instructions. And then it builds. They stop challenging themselves. They default to routine. They seek comfort instead of learning. And their brain begins to follow that story. I guess we're done growing. And once your brain believes that, it starts to shrink structurally, chemically, behaviorally. The hippocampus, the part of your brain tied to memory and spatial awareness, actually begins to lose volume. And the prefrontal cortex, your decision-making powerhouse, goes dimmer. Not because of time, but because of disuse. But here's the twist: this decline isn't inevitable. Not at all. In fact, research shows that even in your 70s and 80s, your brain is still plastic, still capable of growing, rewiring, strengthening, if you give it the chance, if you give it a reason. And that's where the puzzle becomes more than a game. It becomes proof. Proof that your mind is still sharp enough to work through ambiguity, to hold multiple variables to make decisions based on incomplete information. That's intelligence. That's adaptability. That's the kind of mental capacity that keeps you driving safely, holding conversations, managing medications, remembering appointments, making sound financial choices. When you solve a puzzle at 70, you're not just solving shapes and words, you're running a diagnostic on your own brain. You're proving to yourself, I'm still here. I still have it. And that matters more than most people realize. Because when you feel mentally strong, you move differently. You speak more confidently. You show up in conversations without fear. You hold your place in your community and your family, not just as a witness, but as a contributor. And nothing preserves dignity like the ability to contribute. So why do some people lose that sharpness while others keep it alive? It's not just genetics. It's not luck. It's not about IQ. It's about mental lifestyle. What you feed your brain daily, what you read, what you watch, what you avoid, what you wrestle with, those decisions form a cognitive fingerprint. They determine which pathways stay active, which ones wither, in solving puzzles. That's one of the few activities that works across multiple domains: verbal, spatial, logical, and emotional. It's a full brain workout. And if you've kept that going into your 70s, even occasionally, you've preserved more than you know. But the danger comes when you stop, when you assume it's too late, when you say, I'm not as sharp as I used to be, and then act like that's permanent. Because the brain listens to what you believe. If you say it's done growing, it agrees. If you say it's still learning, it adapts. And that's not motivation, that's neuroscience. Now here's the hook. What if the puzzle you solve today isn't just a sign of your strength, but the very tool that keeps you strong tomorrow? What if this small moment of challenge is the key to unlocking sharper focus, better memory, even improved mood, and sleep? Because it is. Cognitive training doesn't just build brain power, it improves your whole system. You feel more alert, you become more decisive, you experience less anxiety, less cognitive fog, more joy. And that joy is not just emotional, it's biochemical. Your brain rewards learning with feel-good neurochemicals like dopamine and serotonin. So when you solve something difficult at 70, you don't just prove your intelligence. You get a biological hit of clarity and confidence that spills into everything else you do. That's why it matters. Not for the puzzle, for the ripple effect. And here's where everything becomes personal, because the puzzle isn't about numbers or shapes or logic. It's about you. It's about who you are when no one's watching. It's about whether you still believe in your ability to engage with the world, to find solutions, to contribute your mind to something meaningful. That quiet moment when you solve something, when it clicks, that's not just cognition, that's identity. And after 70, when the world begins to treat you differently, when people speak slower, explain things twice, or assume you're not as quick as you used to be, that puzzle becomes your protest. It's your proof that you are still here, still sharp, still more than capable. But what happens if you don't have that moment anymore? What happens if you stop feeding your brain the friction it needs to stay alive? That's when decline speeds up. Because the human brain, brilliant as it is, begins shrinking not when you age, but when you retreat. It happens when you stop engaging with complexity. When you stop learning names, stop asking questions, stop figuring things out. And most heartbreaking of all, it's when you start believing you're supposed to fade, that this fog is normal, that your slow response is just how it goes. But that belief is dangerous. Because when you accept the decline as inevitable, you stop resisting it. And when you stop resisting, your brain stops fighting back. You become a passenger instead of a pilot. And that, more than the symptoms themselves, is what speeds up deterioration. But here's the hook that flips everything. Even now, no matter your age, your history, your memory, you can reignite your brain's desire to solve. Think about it. When you were younger, puzzles were everywhere. Not just in games, but in life. You were constantly learning, adapting, experimenting. That was brain fuel. You had to figure out how to raise a family, fix things around the house, make tough financial decisions. Your mind was constantly being tested, and it rose to the challenge. Now the world's quieter. You've built routines, Maybe you've downsized responsibility. Maybe people help you more. Maybe your days look the same. And with that sameness comes a slow numbing, a cognitive lull. But the ability to solve, to reason, to challenge yourself, it's still there. It's just been put to sleep. And the puzzle, that's how you wake it back up. Not by playing to pass the time, but by pushing past what's comfortable, solving a hard riddle, trying a new type of logic game, tackling something you've never tried before. That's the moment your brain says, finally something worth wiring for. But this isn't just about solo puzzles. It's also about social puzzles. Conversation, conflict, storytelling, games with grandkids, planning a trip, relearning a new app. All of that is puzzle solving. And every time you do it, every time you work through something, instead of stepping aside, you're protecting your brain. You're saying, I still belong in this world. I still know how to think through the unknown. Because that's what cognitive resilience is, the ability to stay mentally flexible, emotionally grounded, and curious in the face of new information. That's what keeps you young, not your appearance, not your energy, but your curiosity. And if that sounds out of reach, here's something else you need to hear. Your brain is listening to how you speak about it. Every time you say, I'm too old for this, or I can't figure things out anymore, your mind internalizes that script. It starts reinforcing the idea that learning is no longer necessary. But every time you say, let me try, or I haven't done this in a while, but I'll figure it out, something different happens. Your brain reopens the circuits it almost gave up on. Because learning isn't age-dependent, it's effort-dependent. You don't have to be fast. You have to be engaged. You don't have to solve every puzzle perfectly. You just have to show up. That's the key. And showing up, especially when it's hard, is what separates decline from growth. And what happens when you keep growing? Everything changes. You don't just solve puzzles, you solve moments in your life with more confidence. You respond better to stress. You bounce back faster from confusion. You stay mentally available for the people who need you most. And that availability, that presence, that's what aging with grace really means. It means you didn't leave your mind behind. It means you stayed in the game. And that game, it's still being played every time you try, every time you stretch, every time you pause over a puzzle and say, let me think. Because what's truly at stake here isn't just your ability to solve puzzles, it's your relationship with your own mind. And that relationship gets tested every time you feel slow, unsure, or hesitant. Every time you say, my memory isn't what it used to be. Every time someone finishes your sentence for you or repeats something louder, assuming you didn't get it. These aren't just annoyances. They chip away at your self-trust. And little by little, you start believing the worst lie of all, that you're becoming irrelevant. But here's the truth. Your brain wants you to remember you are not fading. You are evolving. And every time you challenge yourself by solving a puzzle, learning something new, asking better questions, you send a signal that you're still fully present, that your story isn't closing, it's expanding. And here's something most people never understand until it's too late. The more you avoid challenge, the faster your mind contracts. But the more you embrace struggle, even small ones, the more your brain rebuilds itself. That's how neuroplasticity works. It's not magical, it's mechanical. When you stretch your brain, it grows. When you sit idle, it shrinks. So if you can still solve that logic puzzle, if you can hold that sequence in your head, if you can still track a complicated conversation, you have something that millions have already lost. And that's not just good news, it's responsibility. You owe it to yourself to protect that gift. You owe it to your family, your community, your future self. Because the moment you stop growing, you stop contributing. And when you stop contributing, you start disappearing from the room, from the conversation, from your own life. But here's the catch. You don't have to disappear. You don't have to get quieter. You don't have to let the next decade be softer, smaller, safer. You can get sharper. You can get bolder. You can challenge yourself harder at 70 than you did at 40, not because you have to, but because you still can. And that can is what changes everything. And if you're thinking, but I haven't been doing this. I've let my mind get dull. I haven't challenged myself in years. That's not failure. That's opportunity, because your brain is still listening, even now. And one small puzzle, one new idea, one moment of real effort can start the ignition again. You can light it back up. It's never too late, not for growth, not for strength, not for pride. The pride of looking at something hard and saying, I figured it out. That feeling, that's dignity. That's vitality, and that's yours to reclaim starting right now. So the next time someone hands you a puzzle or life hands you a challenge, you already know what to do. Lean in, try, think, struggle, stretch, and smile, because if your brain can still solve it at 70, it's not just functioning, it's amazing. You don't need a trophy to know you're still sharp. You just need that moment when the answer comes, when the pieces fit, when the light in your mind turns back on and reminds you you're still in this. That puzzle wasn't just a challenge, it was a mirror. A mirror reflecting your resilience, your brilliance, your presence. So hold on to that. Protect it. Keep feeding it. Because the day you stop solving is the day your mind starts folding inward. But you haven't stopped, and that means your best thinking days may still be ahead. Don't let anyone, including yourself, convince you that aging means fading. It doesn't. It means focusing, choosing, reclaiming what makes you feel fully alive. And if a single puzzle can do that, you already know what to do next. Don't stop now. You've only just proven what's possible.